Alright, coming in at number 10, we have the deep space radio bursts. Mystery fast radio bursts were discovered in 2007. These bursts flash for a micro instant but emit more energy than the sun does in 10,000 years. The high energy surges of long waves have been detected 18 times over the past 10 years, and one burst in 2012 recorded in Puerto Rico occurred numerous times in the same pattern. Okay, this is what it sounded like. After fierce debates and a lot of head scratching, the source of the sound was traced to a microgalaxy 3 billion light years away from Earth. A lot of theorists have concluded that the sound is a space signal from another world or a parallel universe looking to get in touch.
Coming in at number 9 is missing time. So I feel like a lot of people will be able to identify with this feeling or experience and yet not know it could very well be evidence of an alternate reality. So this is a story of John Carlson. In the late 70s, John was in high school and his house was about a 1.5-mile walk from his school. He walked there and back every day, and it was a pretty straightforward route that he knew very well. One day he was walking home when he saw a bunch of guys that usually bullied him, and he took a different route. Again, even this other route he knew very well. He'd also taken it before, so it wasn't anything new. But on the walk, things just seemed off. Despite school just ending, it was eerily quiet and he felt like things just weren't real. As he was approaching an intersection, he saw the stores he usually saw there, but the silence persisted. He realized that even though he was walking towards the intersection, the stores and landmarks kept getting further and further away from him. Like a mirage, he didn't understand and started feeling anxious and disoriented, and then blank. A complete loss of memory, and when he awakened, he was on a different street in a different part of town, quite a while away from the intersection he was at before. And he had no idea how he got there, but within a few minutes, his mum pulled up and asked him if he was alright. Normally his parents never looked for him as long as he came home before dinner, but his mum somehow just knew exactly where he was. When he asked her why she went to look for him, she said she was just doing chores at home when a voice in her head said, "Get John, he needs you." And a lot of people have had the same missing piece of time experience, so they've theorized that perhaps these blips are us crossing into another universe and taking your alternate selves' place and vice versa, so when you swap back, you end up somewhere else and not knowing how you got there. At number 8 we have the Large Hadron Collider, LHC for short. CERN, which is the European Organization for Nuclear Research, restarted their newly upgraded LHC in order to find out more about dark matter and look for tiny black holes that could be gateways to alternate universes. This LHC is the world's most powerful particle accelerator, and the point of it is to try and recreate the conditions present during the Big Bang to see what kind of matter was produced. Its other project is finding those tiny black holes. A paper published by scientists at the University of Waterloo proposed a way to prove black holes connect our universe with other universes, so CERN intends on testing and proving their hypothesis. If they do, and it's likely that they do, it'll be the first experiment that proves the existence of alternate realities ever. Hopefully they also find out how to transition from this reality to that one. Thanks. Filling our number 7 slot is the Bermuda Triangle. I've been interested in the Bermuda Triangle ever since I found out people and airplanes and ships go missing in the area. There's just too much intrigue to not be interested. It's mysterious, things disappear, time and space becomes distorted. It's like a world of its own. The first article ever written about the place dubbed it the Sea of the Devil, which is just not the way you want to debut into the world of print. It's really not. Over the past century, there have been hundreds and hundreds of large air and sea vessels that have just disappeared. Other cases involve perfectly intact and working sea craft completely abandoned by their crew and the crew never being found. Eyewitnesses who have been and survived recall compasses going crazy when they entered the area, unusual clouds, and entering a rotating substance and exiting through a luminescent curtain of some kind. I don't know. Scientists like Einstein and Michio Kaku came up with theories about the refraction of time. Kaku had a theory about the river of time, saying it can lead to the formation of whirlpools of time in which it's possible to enter into different time spaces and that the river can fork into many directions. And obviously those different time spaces have alternate realities. The founder of the spiritual practice Falun Dafa said the triangle is definitely a gateway to another reality, but it's just very unpredictable. If the door happens to be open, then a ship ship could slip in for a moment and come back out by accident, but that second could be decades in our world because time is different in every dimension. What do you guys think? Now at number 6 is the desert blip. Back in 1972, 4 girls were coming back from a Utah rodeo and they took the Utah Highway 56. Since their landlady had a really strict 12 AM curfew and it was already 10:30, the girls decided to take a shortcut off the highway which went towards Gadianton Canyon. They were driving on black asphalt for a while, but somewhere along the way it transformed into cracked concrete. The girls encountered a dead end and went back the way they came, but it took them a few minutes to realize their surroundings had completely changed. They went from driving in the desert to driving by lush fields of wheat near a large lake. At this point the girls had no idea where they were, and in the distance they saw light coming from a building. So they went towards it, and when they got closer they saw the neon sign spell out a message which they couldn't read. The letters or symbols were twisted lines and curves, a language none of the girls had ever seen before. Then all of a sudden extremely tall men started pouring out of the building and started waving their arms and pointing at the girls and then coming towards them. They looked human but they weren't, and the girls took off screaming and crying. 30 seconds later they realized the people were following them in egg-shaped vehicles that had 1 headlight, 2 front wheels and 1 rear. They drove back into the canyon and soon lost the eggs, but wow, I really wonder where the hell they ended up. I'm convinced it was another universe. The sign, I can just imagine the sign being one of those fonts on Word that you have no idea what it's saying. It's probably one of those. Coming in at number 5 are psychopaths. Juicy, I know. So way back during the eugenics movement, scientists believed mankind could be improved by breeding out the evil and bad ones amongst us. It led to sterilizing prisoners and mental patients by the early 20th century. But Linda Campbell puts forth a theory that psychopaths are spiritually dead, demonized human predators that disguise the fact their mind is demonically filled. Their lack of empathy allows them to ignore reality and impose false realities on others made up of lies. The lack of empathy makes them blind to humanity, and so humans to them can be easily sacrificed, abused, tormented, you name it. It can happen to them. They possess an unlimited amount of demonic energy and get a thrill out of things we would categorize as screwed up. So Linda theorized these people actually exist in a demonically twisted upside down reality where everything they're doing and feeling makes complete sense to them in their reality. Our reality and theirs overlap, and their reality is a devilish anti-world within ours. And how this overlap happened, I have no idea. But it's not the first time blips or overlaps have popped up within this topic. So at number 4 is the cabin. It was so hard finding links about this story, it's like the universe just didn't want me to share it and know more, but I will. But anyway, many years ago a woman and her friends went camping near a forest. They were having a good time, toasting marshmallows, the whole shebang, when they heard some music come from a stone cabin. First of all, I don't know why they weren't suspicious of a random stone cabin in the forest to begin with, but sure. Moving on, when they went to the cabin they apparently saw a bunch of people wearing 17th century clothing just dancing inside. The woman was almost drawn to it and she tried to enter it, but before she entered all the way her friend pulled her away and half her body immediately became paralyzed. Yes, the half that entered the cabin. Like out of nowhere nothing happened, she just became paralyzed. Many believe the woman actually stepped into a dimensional gateway to an alternate reality, but when she was pulled away she felt a shift that completely threw off her nervous system. I mean obviously since our systems don't experience alternate realities frequently, and thus she became paralyzed. Filling a number 3 slot are doppelgangers. It's a tricky subject. How is it possible for someone unrelated to us at all to look exactly like us? Looks are genetic, we look the way we do because of our ancestors, I don't need to explain that, so how can anyone else look exactly like us? From a scientific and biological standpoint, it just doesn't make sense. They're meant to be us in an alternate reality living their lives, but somehow in the configuration of endless possibilities of realities and universes, a glitch occurred and 2 of the same person ended up in the same reality when technically they shouldn't have been. They're not our clones, they still carry out their own lives like they would have in the alternate reality, except they're here and they look exactly like us. And now at number 2 is Laxaria. Back in 1851, a man called Jofar Voren was found in a German village speaking a bit of broken, weird German. When locals in the area found him, he said he spoke the languages Ibranian and Laxarian, and that he was from Laxaria, from an area called Sacria, which was separated from Europe by an ocean. He said his world had 5 great compartments, aka continents, called Sacria, Asta, Afla, Eupla, and Oslar, which obviously stunned everyone because none of those things exist. He went on to say he was Christian, but that it was also called Aspasian in Laxaria. You may be wondering why he was in Germany to begin with. He could have just easily stayed in Laxaria. He was trying to find his long lost brother, but then suffered a shipwreck on his way and wound up in Germany. Despite looking at many maps, he couldn't trace his route from any shore or find his way back. People believe he's from an alternate universe and somehow ended up in ours. Who knows, maybe he went through his world's version of the Bermuda Triangle, and that's how he got here. And finally, at number 1 are the Green Children of Woolpit. Now in the 12th century, a brother and sister were found near a wolf pit in the village of Woolpit, Suffolk. Yes, they got the name of the village from the wolf pits in the village. Now they looked like normal human kids, except for the fact that their skin was heavily tinged with green. They spoke an unknown language that none of the locals had heard of, would only eat raw beans, and their clothing was just very bizarre. After a while they learned how to eat normal food and lost their green hue, but the boy soon died. The girl, however, learned how to speak English, and she explained how her brother and her had come from a place called St. Martin's Land, which was a subterranean world that only housed green people. She said the sun never shone there and it was twilight all the time. When asked how they got to Woolpit, she said she had no idea. She recalled herding her dad's cattle with her brother and then hearing a loud noise, and then they suddenly just end up near the wolf pit. The girl grew up and got married and led her life, but many people theorize the kids came from an alternate reality but just adapted to ours. For me personally, since it was the 12th century and travel was hard for locals of small villages, maybe the kids were from the Middle East or Asia, which could explain why the locals didn't recognize their language or clothing, but that still doesn't explain how they got there or the greenness of their skin, so maybe I should just stop talking.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the story of Carol Chase Mckellany. One day in 2006, Carol was driving through San Bernardino, California on her way to Paris, California, where she was going to stay for a few days. On her travels, she saw a sign for Riverside, which was nearby, and she decided that since her family had roots there, maybe it was time to stop in for a visit. As she went into Riverside, she realized that everything looked different from how she remembered it, and was unable to find her old house that she grew up in. She tried to go to the street that her grandmother used to live on, but that one was different too. And when she tried to visit her grandparents' graves at the cemetery, the whole place didn't even exist. Even the people who were living in the town gave Carol a bad feeling, and she didn't even want to get out of her car. She decided she would just be better off continuing on her trip and left Riverside. Carol didn't end up returning to Riverside until a few years later, after her dad had passed and she was attending the funeral. To Carol's surprise, when she went to Riverside this time, everything was as she remembered it from her childhood. Carol believes that day that she ended up in some sort of parallel universe form of Riverside, and she even said that she felt like if she left her car that day, she was going to get stuck there.
Coming in at number 9, we have the man from Taured. Were we sent a man from another parallel universe, or did he arrive via some kind of portal or vortex? Our story here stems back to 1954 when a man was detained at the Japanese border after arriving on a plane from Europe to Haneda Airport. The man said he was on his 3rd business trip to Japan that year, and he had a wallet filled with a mixture of currencies, seeming to verify his business traveler status. When he presented his passport, officials were absolutely baffled, asking where he was from. Now the man, who primarily spoke French, said, "Taured. Where is this mystery place?" He showed his passport again and the stamps that supported his travels. The only thing is, nobody had ever heard of Taured. The company he was traveling to said that they'd never heard of him, and he was carrying a checkbook to a non-existent bank. When he was asked to point out Taured on the map, he pointed to where Andorra is today and seemed confused and offended to be told that it's not a real country. He was detained in a hotel overnight while Japanese authorities decided what to do with him, but by morning he disappeared. Did he accidentally walk through a portal to another universe? Maybe. Coming in at number 8, we have the Bernstein-Bears phenomena. Also called the Mandela effect, the Bernstein-Bears phenomena claims to prove the existence of parallel universes with subtle differences. People vehemently claim that the Bernstein-Bears were spelled with an E and not an A, and honestly, I for one absolutely thought that the Looney Tunes were the Looney Tunes until I watched a video on the phenomena last year, and now I'm straight up convinced that I'm living in the wrong universe, as it is clearly Looney Tunes. They're cartoons. this new world doesn't make any sense. Some people out there are also adamant that Nelson Mandela died in prison in the late 1980s, which is more than just a slightly altered timeline. It's not just spellings here, this is a pretty major parallel universe event. Coming in at number 7, we have Deja Vu. Deja vu, a glitch in the Matrix, or a signal from a parallel universe. While both seem as likely as one another, it is thought by some that the weird moments where we feel like we've been or experienced something before are actually signals that something key is happening in our parallel lives. Not only do some people believe parallel universes exist side by side, some people think they interact with one another in some way. According to Dr. Michio Kaku, an American futurist, deja vu occurs as a result of a person's ability to flip between universes. Others believe it is because we're vibrating in unison with the frequency of another universe that's parallel with our very own. Oh, I've gone cross-eyed. Coming in at number 6, we have the Lost Beatles album. A parallel universe may have given our world a gift in the form of a Lost Beatles album, Everyday Chemistry. This story goes that in 2009, a man called James Richards found himself accidentally in a parallel universe, as you do. Luckily, there was also a person from another parallel universe there, a man named Jonas. Now, Jonas was on a trans-dimensional tourism trip from the other Earth, and he told Richards that in his world, amongst other things, John Lennon was still alive and the Beatles never broke up. Richards then stole a copy of a later album never released by the band and returned with it to our Earth. What did he do with one of the most sought after pieces of music from a non-history that almost but never happened here? He uploaded it to the internet. Eagle-eared fans were absolutely having none of it though. They said the album is comprised of clever mashups from all of the Beatles' solo careers. Richards later said that even though in an alternate universe the Beatles hadn't broke up, that didn't mean their future music ideas disappeared. I'm not so sure about this one, but I would love to hear what Paul McCartney has to say about it. Paul, tell us, is it real? I guess you're living in another universe so you don't know, but I don't know. I feel like you'd be able to answer. Coming in at number 5, we have dreams. Could our dreams be signals from a parallel universe? Some say maybe. In a number of First Nations cultures in North and Central America, people believe that dreams allow us to walk planes in other dimensions. Their reasoning is that dreams take place in color and can include all of their senses. They think that when you're in a dream, you are in another world, perhaps a world you already exist in. If you're doing something strange in your dream, maybe it's a sign that actually you live a far stranger life somewhere else. Coming in at number 4, we have the bruise. Anyone else here bruised like a peach? Just me? Me? And the universe. In 2010, along with a team of researchers, Stephen Feeney of the University College in London announced that he had discovered patterns in the radiation background left over from the Big Bang. Now this seemed to suggest that our universe bumped into not 1, not 2, but 4 other universes and was left bruised. Okay, what is the plural of universes? Universi? Universi? Universi. Also, from the bruising, further researchers in California think that it is clear that this leads to some kind of like bubble universe theory, which maybe I can get on board with. Maybe Men in Black got it right when they imagined us all as marbles in a big bag. Coming into number 3, we have the cold spot. In 2004, astronomers found something that baffled them, an unusually cold area of space. The area is 1.8 billion light years across and much colder than its surroundings. The area also contained 10,000 less galaxies than in other areas of a similar size studied in space. A researcher from Durham University in the UK believed that the spot could be evidence of a multiverse. They said it seemed as if a parallel universe smashed into ours, affecting it like a car pile-up on the motorway would, only they're calling it a cosmic shunt. They believed the impact was so vast it pushed energy out from a big region of space, therefore creating the cold spot. It's hard to get your head around, but that is what they think. Coming in at number 2, we have City in the Sky. In October 2015, Chinese TV went wild when thousands of residents in 2 areas of the country reported seeing a huge floating city in the clouds. Puzzled onlookers saw skyscrapers in the clouds and believed that they were seeing a ghost city or the colliding of our reality with a parallel universe. The phenomenon occurred in both Guangdong and Jiangxi, with some believing it was the beginning of an alien invasion. The images were caught on camera for the world to see and promptly went viral across the rest of the globe. So what on Earth, or above Earth, is going on? Well, even though it looks like a city in the clouds to you and me, apparently it is an optical illusion called Fata Morgana, which is the natural mirage. So that is what a lot of scientists are saying anyway, but other people are convinced it's a sign of a parallel universe, or even a window to another world. Finally, coming into number 1, we have black holes. The theory of loop quantum gravity suggests that there is no point of singularity in a black hole, rather they're simply folds in the universe. Everything we know about quantum physics tells us that information is never lost, that energy can't be created or destroyed, so perhaps black holes don't suck and destroy, maybe they suck and create. A lot of scientists are dabbling with the idea that black holes are indeed folds or portals to an older part of the universe. Professor Stephen Hawking gave a lecture in 2015 wherein he discussed how it may be possible to come out of the other side of a black hole. He said the hole would need to be large, and if it was rotating, it might have a passage to another universe, but you couldn't come back to our universe. Anyone want to take that one-way trip? I don't know if I do.
Starting us off number 10 are dreams. I'm pretty sure everyone in life has wondered what their dreams meant. Anytime I dream of anything traumatic, I always Google it and I'm like, oh my god, I'm about to start a new chapter of my life, or one's about to end, what do I do? Either way, dream travel is a theory that our dreams show glimpses of alternate universes or realities that are beyond ours. In a multiverse where there are endless versions of you and your life, and they've all branched off and have lived different lives, if you're having a really vivid dream to the point it's so lifelike you feel like you're really there, it's possible we're tapping into the experiences and memories of an alternate us. Say if you keep dreaming about living in a different country, or having a different job, or eating something so detailed you can smell it and taste it, it's been theorized it's because you've probably already experienced those things in another timeline, and our sleeping mind somehow lets us access it. Physicists have theorized since our conscious mind's barriers are down during sleep, it allows our subconscious mind to go into the windows between realities and contact the consciousness of our other selves. This suggests that maybe our subconscious mind operates in our own reality and the others all at the same time. Another theory is that despite only seeing one course of events for each action or decision we make, we still imagine what would have happened if we did or chose differently. So based on that, our dreams could be showing us how all those other decisions would have played out if our other selves made them. That was a lot to digest, I know, and there's a lot more to come.
In our number 9 spot, we have this story from Peru. The Marcohuesi forest in Peru has been called a doorway to another dimension for centuries because of all the stone figures that resemble human faces and religious figures, and because of the amount of people who go missing and never get found. There was a group of friends who decided to enter the forest despite all of these stories, and they ended up stumbling upon a cabin that appeared to have some sort of party going on inside. As the group went up to the cabin, they saw people inside, but all of the people were in 17th century garb, and nothing that was modern or similar to what the group of friends was wearing. One of the friends began to try and enter the cabin and was halfway in the door when the friends quickly pulled her back. After being pulled out, it was discovered that the half of her body that had entered the cabin was now paralyzed. If her body really did become paralyzed because it had entered another dimension, that would definitely explain all of those strange stone statues. In our number 8 spot, we have the old story of the green children of Woolpit. In the 12th century, it is said that 2 children were discovered just outside of Woolpit, Great Britain, but what was so weird about them is that they had green skin. When the children were brought back into the city and given food and water, they refused to eat anything other than raw beans. Eventually, their green skin began to fade and turned into a more normal human color. One of the children passed away, but the girl continued to grow and eventually learned English. When she was finally able to communicate with those around her, she told told the story of how her and her brother had come from a place that was in constant darkness called St. Martin's Land. Everyone from her town lived underground, and everyone had the same green skin. The girl and her brother were wandering around one day when they came across a cave, and they decided to enter. They kept walking and eventually came to Woolpit, and when they turned around, the cave they had been in disappeared. Did this cave act as a portal to an alternate reality for these kids? If so, I don't ever want to end up where they come from because it does not sound nice. Guys, before I continue on in this list, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out. In our number 7 spot today, we have the story of James Richards. In 2009, James was walking his dog when he tripped and knocked his head, rendering him unconscious. When he woke up, he found himself beside some sort of machine he didn't recognize, and there was another man named Jonas who said he had just found James' body while he was on a work trip for the interdimensional travel company that he worked for. What? The two ended up striking up some sort of conversation, I guess like you would when someone just casually tells you that they travel through dimensions for work. They started chatting about what pop culture was like in each of their dimensions, and they came to discover that, of course, the Beatles existed in both of their dimensions. Jonas ended up explaining that in his dimension, the Beatles were all still alive and they had never actually broken up. Jonas gave James a cassette tape of the Beatles music from his dimension that certainly does not exist in ours. When James returned to our universe, he ended up uploading the tape to a website called thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com. In our number 6 spot, we have a story from Reddit that was posted by the user 2homfolk. One day, the writer was driving home from school and began trying to call their boyfriend using the hands-free feature. The phone didn't end up ringing even after 5 separate attempts, so they turned the phone off and then on again and tried one more time. This time the boyfriend answered, but it didn't really sound like the person they knew and loved, and they also sounded like they were pretty freaked out. He said, "Liz, is this you?" Liz kept saying hello, but wasn't getting an answer, and panicked and hung up the phone. Liz tried calling again twice, but there was no ring again. Luckily, on the 3rd try, another voice picked up the phone and asked, "Is this better?" Liz then asked who this was, and the voice responded with something unintelligible, and then they hung up. Liz continued to call the boyfriend until he picked up the phone. Sounding significantly more like himself and not panicked at all, Liz asked who was picking up the phone earlier, and the boyfriend explained that no one had picked up the phone because he had never received any other calls. When Liz got home and checked the boyfriend's call log, they realized that only one call had gone through to his phone. Liz made sure that they were dialing the right number when they were calling, and it was the correct number every single time. Who had been answering the boyfriend's phone? At our number 5 spot and halfway mark, we have another Reddit post from Tiger King Quentin. The user explains that this story takes place when they were 8 years old in Florida with their family and their friend's family for a 2-week vacation. The friend really wanted to go to Wet n Wild and begged for his parents to take them there, so they ended up going one day during the trip. The boy and his dad ended up going into the wave pool that day and were mainly staying in the shallow area. After a while, a larger wave comes their way and it takes the boy underneath the water. He realizes he can't feel the bottom anymore and begins to panic, trying to break the surface of the water. When he reaches the top and gets his head out of the water, he realizes that he is no longer at Wet n Wild, but is in the middle of an ocean a couple hundred meters from an island. He doesn't know where or what this island is, but after a few seconds he begins to feel lightheaded and sinks back into the water. Luckily, he then feels some hands under his arms and he realizes his dad is lifting him out of the water back at Wet n Wild, asking him if he's alright. Maybe this wave pool really did take this kid to an alternate dimension. In our number 4 spot, we have a story coming from Tokyo in 1954. At the Haneda airport, a plane from Europe landed and dropped off its passengers. As the passengers made their way through customs, one man told the officials that he was just on a normal business trip that he made regularly. He spoke French as his first language, but could also speak Japanese and a few other languages. Officials then asked him where he was from, and his response is where things take a turn. He said he was from a place called Taured, which was on the border between France and Spain. When officials told him that the place didn't exist, he gave them a passport that had been issued by this country that isn't real. This passport had also been stamped, validating all of the previous trips he had said he went on, including his previous trips to Japan. Officials called the company that he said he was meeting with, and the company said that they had never heard of him or his company before. They then called the hotel he said he had a reservation at, and the bank that was listed on his checkbook. The hotel said that there was no reservation for him, and the bank just didn't exist at all. Officials thought that maybe he was confused, so they showed him a map and pointed to the country of Andorra, asking him if this is what he meant. The man began to get upset, saying that Andorra didn't exist and that it had misplaced Taured, where he claimed to be from. Customs decided to detain the man and put him in a hotel room for the night while they decided what to do next. The next day when they went to collect the man, he had totally disappeared with all of his personal identification and documents. Police searched for this missing man, but he was never found. Maybe this man somehow accidentally found himself in a parallel universe separate from his own, and I just hope he was able to make it back to wherever he was from and return to his normal life. In our number 3 spot, we have the story of a man named Jafar Vorin. Jafar was a strange man who just appeared in a village one day before he was picked up by authorities. The language he spoke was closest to German, but even then it wasn't quite the same. Jafar said he was from a place called Laxaria and that he was searching for his brother who had been lost in a shipwreck. He couldn't point out where he was from, but was able to tell authorities some geographical information about where he had come from. He explained that his home had 5 separate compartments, or continents, called Sacria, Aflar, Aslar, and Uplar. He couldn't show anyone how he had arrived at the village, and he had no idea how to get home, so he just ended up living out the rest of his life in Berlin. It's crazy to think that maybe he was a man from another dimension and he ended up just getting stuck here. I feel bad for him, and I wish we could have helped him return home. In our number 2 spot, we have the story of Pedro Ramirez. Pedro was driving from a place called Seville to his home in Alcalá de Guadalajara on a November night in 1986. As he went around a curve in the road, he suddenly found himself on a 6-lane highway, and as he continued to drive straight, he saw tall buildings, unidentified structures, and grass that was 2 feet tall growing alongside the road. These were all things that were out of the ordinary for that area. He continued driving, and suddenly Pedro heard a voice that told him he had been transferred to another country in a different hemisphere. Pedro didn't know what to do, so he kept driving for another hour before stopping on the side of the road to take a look around. After a short break, he began driving again, only to come across a sign with 3 arrows pointing in different directions. One was labeled Malaga, the other was Sevilla, and the last was Alcabala. Pedro decided to take the Sevilla route, and after driving down it for a while, he stopped again. When he pulled over and got out of the car, he stood there for a second, and then when he looked back to his left, he saw he was standing right outside of his home. He tried to go back to where he had been before, but couldn't find anything that he had seen before, including the sign with the 3 arrows. Who knows where Pedro was for that while, but I'm very glad that he ended up making it home safely. In our number 1 spot today, we have the story of Lorena Garcia. One morning in 2008, Lorena woke up in a life that was similar to the one she was living when she went to sleep, but certainly not the same. At first it was just small things like her bed sheets and her pajamas, but when she got to work, things began to escalate. Lorena realized that her office wasn't her office and that she worked in the same building, but in a completely different department. She had never even met her boss before, so she knew that this couldn't have been a moment where she just got lost or confused. When she returned home after work that day, she was met by her ex-boyfriend, only to find out that he was apparently her current boyfriend. She tried to find the person that she had been dating for months, but he didn't seem to exist in this new life and world that she found herself in. Lorena began to seek psychiatric help because she was fearing that she was having some sort of nervous breakdown, but all tests revealed that she seemed to be of sound body and mind. The strange occurrences continued when Lorena asked her family how her sister was doing. Lorena knew that her sister had recently had shoulder surgery and wanted to check in, but when she asked her family, they were baffled by her claims and insisted that there was no surgery that had taken place on anyone in the family. Lorena couldn't find any answers to her situation and was having no luck with a medical explanation either. She is convinced that she went to sleep one night and woke up in a parallel universe that was altered slightly by small decisions that she had made. Honestly, after all of these stories, I kind of believe Lorena too.